Chapter 46 of Little Women. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Chapter 46. Under the Umbrella. While Laurie and Amy were taking conjugal strolls over velvet carpets as they set their house in order and planned a blissful future, Mr. Bear and Joe were enjoying promenades of a different sort, along muddy roads and sodden fields. "I always do take a walk toward evening, and I don't know why I should give it up just because I happen to meet the Professor on his way out," said Joe to herself after 2 or 3 encounters, for though there were 2 paths to Meg's, whichever one she took she was sure to meet him, either going or returning. He was always walking rapidly, and never seemed to see her until quite close, when he would look as if his short-sighted eyes had failed to recognize the approaching lady till that moment. Then, if she was going to Meg's, he always had something for the babies. If her face was turned homeward, he had merely strolled down to see the river, and was just returning, unless they were tired of his frequent calls. Under the circumstances, what could Joe do but greet him civilly and invite him in? If she was tired of his visits, she concealed her weariness with perfect skill, and took care that there should be coffee for supper, as Mr. Bear, doesn't like tea. By the second week every one knew perfectly well what was going on, yet every one tried to look as if they were stone blind to the changes in Joe's face. They never asked why she sang about her work, did up her hair 3 times a day, and got so blooming with her evening exercise. And no one seemed to have the slightest suspicion that Professor Bear, while talking philosophy with the father, was giving the daughter lessons in love. Joe couldn't even loose her heart in a decorous manner, but sternly tried to quench her feelings, and failing to do so, led a somewhat agitated life. She was mortally afraid of being laughed at for surrendering, after her many and vehement declarations of independence. Laurie was her especial dread. But thanks to the new manager, he behaved with praiseworthy propriety, never called Mr. Bear a capital old fellow in public, never alluded in the remotest manner to Joe's improved appearance, or expressed the least surprise at seeing the Professor's hat on the Marches' table nearly every evening. But he exulted in private, and longed for the time to come when he could give Joe a piece of plate with a bear and a ragged staff on it as an appropriate coat of arms. For a fortnight the Professor came and went with lover-like regularity. Then he stayed away for 3 whole days, and made no sign, a proceeding which caused everybody to look sober, and Joe to become pensive at first, and then, alas for romance, very cross. "Disgusted, I dare say, and gone home as suddenly as he came. It's nothing to me, of course, but I should think he would have come and bid us good-bye like a gentleman," she said to herself, with a despairing look at the gate as she put on her things for the customary walk one dull afternoon.
"You'd better take the little umbrella, dear. It looks like rain,"
said her mother, observing that she had on her new bonnet, but not alluding to the fact. "Yes, Marmee. Do you want anything in town? I've got to run in and get some paper," returned Joe, pulling out the bow under her chin before the glass as an excuse for not looking at her mother.
"Yes, I want some twilled silesia, a paper of No. 9 needles, and 2 yards of narrow lavender ribbon. Have you got your thick boots on, and something warm under your cloak?"
"I believe so," answered Joe absently.
"If you happen to meet Mr. Bear, bring him home to tea. I quite long to see the dear man,"
added Mrs. March. Joe heard that, but made no answer, except to kiss her mother and walk rapidly away, thinking with a glow of gratitude in spite of her heartache. "How good she is to me! What do girls do who haven't any mothers to help them through their troubles?" The dry goods stores were not down among the counting-houses, banks, and wholesale warerooms where gentlemen most do congregate, but Joe found herself in that part of the city before she did a single errand, loitering along as if waiting for someone, examining engineering instruments in one window and samples of wool in another, with most unfeminine interest, tumbling over barrels, being half smothered by descending bales, and hustled unceremoniously by busy men who looked as if they wondered how the deuce she got there. A drop of rain on her cheek recalled her thoughts from baffled hopes to ruined ribbons, for the drops continued to fall, and being a woman as well as a lover, she felt that, though it was too late to save her heart, she might her bonnet. Now she remembered the little umbrella, which she had forgotten to take in her hurry to be off, but regret was unavailing, and nothing could be done but borrow one or submit to a drenching. She looked up at the lowering sky, down at the crimson bow already flecked with black, forward across the muddy street, then one long lingering look behind, at a certain grimy warehouse, with Hoffman, Swartz and Company over the door, and said to herself with a sternly reproachful air, "It serves me right. What business had I to put on all my best things and come philandering down here, hoping to see the professor? Joe, I'm ashamed of you. No, you shall not go there to borrow an umbrella, or find out where he is from his friends. You shall trudge away and do your errands in the rain, and if you catch your death and ruin your bonnet it's no more than you deserve. Now then." With that she rushed across the street so impetuously that she narrowly escaped annihilation from a passing truck, and precipitated herself into the arms of a stately old gentleman, who said, "I beg pardon, ma'am," and looked mortally offended. Somewhat daunted, Jo righted herself, spread her handkerchief over the devoted ribbons, and putting temptation behind her, hurried on, with increasing dampness about the ankles and much clashing of umbrellas overhead. The fact that a somewhat dilapidated blue one remained stationary above the unprotected bonnet attracted her attention, and looking up, she saw Mr. Bear looking down.
I feel to know the strong-minded lady who goes so bravely under many horse-noses and so fast through much mud. What do you down here, my friend?"
"I'm shopping." Mr. Bear smiled, as he glanced from the pickle factory on one side to the wholesale hide and leather concern on the other, but he only said politely,
"You have no umbrella. May I go also, and take for you the bundles?"
"Yes, thank you." Jo's cheeks were as red as her ribbon, and she wondered what he thought of her, but she didn't care, for in a minute she found herself walking away arm in arm with her professor, feeling as if the sun had suddenly burst out with uncommon brilliancy, that the world was all right again, and that one thoroughly happy woman was paddling through the wet that day. "We thought you had gone," said Jo hastily, for she knew he was looking at her. Her bonnet wasn't big enough to hide her face, and she feared he might think the joy it betrayed unmaidenly.
"Did you believe that I should go with no farewell to those who have been so heavenly kind to me?"
he asked so reproachfully that she felt as if she had insulted him by the suggestion, and answered heartily, "No, I didn't. I knew you were busy about your own affairs, but we rather missed you, father and mother especially."
"And you?"
"I'm always glad to see you, sir." In her anxiety to keep her voice quite calm, Jo made it rather cool, and the frosty little monosyllable at the end seemed to chill the professor, for his smile vanished as he said gravely,
"I thank you, and come one more time before I go.
"You are going, then?"
I have no longer any business here. It is done."
"Successfully, I hope?" said Jo, for the bitterness of disappointment was in that short reply of his.
"I ought to think so, for I have a way open to me by which I can make my bread and give my younglings much help."
"Tell me, please. I like to know all about the boys," said Jo eagerly.
"That is so kind, I gladly tell you. My friends find for me a place in a college, where I teach as at home, and earn enough money to make the way smooth for Franz and Emil. For this I should be grateful, should I not?"
"Indeed you should. How splendid it will be to have you doing what you like, and be able to see you often, and the boys," cried Jo, clinging to the lads as an excuse for the satisfaction she could not help betraying.
"Ah, but we shall not meet often, I fear. This place is at the west."
"So far away!" Aunt Jo left her skirts to their fate, as if it didn't matter now what became of her clothes or herself. Mr. Bear could read several languages, but he had not learned to read women yet. He flattered himself that he knew Jo pretty well, and was therefore much amazed by the contradictions of voice, face, and manner which she showed him in rapid succession that day, for she was in half a dozen different moods in the course of half an hour. When she met him she looked surprised, though it was impossible to help suspecting that she had come for that express purpose. When he offered her his arm she took it with a look that filled him with delight, but when he asked if she missed him she gave such a chilly formal reply that despair fell upon him. On hearing his good fortune she almost clapped her hands. Was the joy all for the boys? Then, on hearing his destination, she said, "So far away," in a tone of despair that lifted him to the pinnacle of hope. But the next minute she tumbled him down again by observing, like one entirely absorbed in the matter, "Here's the place for my errands. Will you come in? It won't take long." Jo rather prided herself upon her shopping capabilities, and particularly wished to impress her escort with the neatness and dispatch with which she would accomplish the business. But owing to the flutter she was in, everything went amiss. She upset the tray of needles, forgot the silesia was to be twilled till it was cut off, gave the wrong change, and covered herself with confusion by asking for lavender ribbon at the calico counter. Mr. Beyer stood by, watching her blush and blunder, and as he watched his own bewilderment seemed to subside, for he was beginning to see that on some occasions women, like dreams, go by contraries. When they came out he put the parcel under his arm with a more cheerful aspect, and splashed through the puddles as if he rather enjoyed it on the whole.
Should we no do a little what you call shopping for the babies, and have a farewell feast tonight if I go for my last call at your so pleasant home?"
he asked, stopping before a window full of fruit and flowers. "What will we buy?" asked Jo, ignoring the latter part of his speech, and sniffing the mingled odors with an affectation of delight as they went in.
"May they have oranges and figs?"
asked Mr. Bear, with a paternal air. "They eat them when they can get them."
"Do you care for nuts?"
"Like a squirrel."
"Hamburg grapes. Yes, we shall drink to the fatherland in those."
Jo frowned upon that piece of extravagance, and asked why he didn't buy a frail of dates, a cask of raisins, and a bag of almonds, and be done with it. Whereat Mr. Bear confiscated her purse, produced his own, and finished the marketing by buying several pounds of grapes, a pot of rosy daisies, and a pretty jar of honey, to be regarded in the light of a demijohn. Then, distorting his pockets with knobby bundles, and giving her the flowers to hold, he put up the old umbrella, and they travelled on again.
"Miss March, I have a great favor to ask of you,"
began the Professor, after a moist promenade of half a block. "Yes, sir?" And Jo's heart began to beat so hard she was afraid he would hear it.
"I am bold to say it in spite of the rain, because so short a time remains to me."
"Yes, sir." And Jo nearly crushed the small flower-pot with the sudden squeeze she gave it.
"I wish to get a little dress for my Tina, and I am too stupid to go alone. Will you kindly give me a word of taste and help?"
"Yes, sir." And Jo felt as calm and cool all of a sudden as if she had stepped into a refrigerator.
"Perhaps also a shawl for Tina's mother. She is so poor and sick, and the husband is such a care. Yes, yes, a thick warm shawl would be a friendly thing to take the little mother."
"I'll do it with pleasure, Mr. Bear. I'm going very fast, and he's getting dearer every minute," added Jo to herself. Then, with a mental shake, she entered into the business with an energy that was pleasant to behold. Mr. Bear left it all to her, so she chose a pretty gown for Tina, and then ordered out the shawls. The clerk, being a married man, condescended to take an interest in the couple, who appeared to be shopping for their family.
"Your lady may prefer this. It's a superior article, a most desirable color, quite chaste and genteel,"
he said, shaking out a comfortable grey shawl, and throwing it over Jo's shoulders. "Does this suit you, Mr. Bear?" she asked, turning her back to him, and feeling deeply grateful for the chance of hiding her face.
"Excellently well. We will have it,"
answered the Professor, smiling to himself as he paid for it, while Jo continued to rummage the counters like a confirmed bargain-hunter.
"Now, shall we go home?"
he asked, as if the words were very pleasant to him. "Yes, it's late, and I'm so tired." Jo's voice was more pathetic than she knew, for now the sun seemed to have gone in as suddenly as it came out, and the world grew muddy and miserable again, and for the first time she discovered that her feet were cold, her head ached, and that her heart was colder than the former, fuller of pain than the latter. Mr. Bear was going away. He only cared for her as a friend. It was all a mistake, and the sooner it was over the better. With this idea in her head she hailed an approaching omnibus with such a hasty gesture that the daisies flew out of the pot and were badly damaged.
"This is not our omnibus,"
said the professor, waving the loaded vehicle away and stopping to pick up the poor little flowers. "I beg your pardon,"